My name is Peter Sanders. If you're hearing this, then the archives were never sealed as they should have been. Here, we collect fragments of stories that were never meant to surface. Voices caught on tape, memories burned into static. Welcome to the Lost Tapes Department.
My name is Michael Turner, and I've lived in the same apartment for nearly 3 years. When you spend that long in a place, you get used to every sound, every creak, every quirk in the walls. My fridge hums a little too loud at night, the ceiling fan ticks once every full rotation, and there's a spot near the kitchen where the floor dips just enough to trip me if I'm not paying attention. Those things annoy me sometimes, but they're familiar. They're mine. That's why what happened last Thursday still won't leave me alone. I work late shifts at a warehouse across town. It's grueling work, loading, stacking, sorting, but it pays the rent. Most nights, I don't get home until after midnight. The building is quiet by then, just the distant echo of pipes and the buzz of the hallway lights. I've built a routine around it. Car door shuts, footsteps up the cracked concrete steps, key in the lock, deadbolt sliding back. By the time I'm inside, I'm usually running on fumes, ready to collapse. That night, everything seemed normal at first. I tossed my jacket over the chair, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and kicked my shoes off into the corner. I remember glancing at the clock on the microwave, 12:47 a.m. Not unusual. Then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, past my bedroom and the spare room I never used, there was a door. A plain white door with a brass handle, sitting flush against the wall. I froze, one hand still halfway to my pocket. My hallway isn't long, maybe 12 steps from the living room to the last bedroom. I know that stretch like I know the back of my hand. There are 2 doors there, always have been, my bedroom and the guest room. That's it. But now there were 3. The new door was on the left side, tucked between the other 2 like it had always been there. But it hadn't. I stared for so long that my eyes watered, waiting for the trick to reveal itself. Maybe I was seeing shadows wrong. Maybe my brain, fried from exhaustion, had invented it. But no, the more I blinked, the clearer it became. The frame was real. The hinges were real. The brass handle reflected the dim light above, catching on the chips of the old bulb. And yet, something about it was off. The frame didn't quite line up with the wall. There were faint cracks running outward, jagged little fractures like the plaster hadn't agreed with the addition. It gave the impression that the door had been shoved in forcefully, like someone had pressed it into reality where it didn't belong. I took a few slow steps closer. The floor creaked under my weight, and I swear the sound seemed to echo louder near that door than anywhere else in the apartment. The air felt cooler, too, the kind of subtle drop in temperature you notice on instinct before your brain catches up. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to reach out if I wanted to. My hand twitched toward the handle, but I pulled it back. Instead, I laughed. It sounded thin, nervous, ridiculous. I even said it out loud just to break the silence. Guess I'm more tired than I thought. But the laugh died quickly. The sound didn't feel like it belonged in that hallway anymore. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the landlord had done some renovation without telling me. Maybe there'd always been a door there and I'd just never noticed. But 3 years is a long time to miss something so obvious. And why would a new door appear overnight? I backed away slowly, forcing my eyes off it, retreating to my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it, even though I'd never locked it before. For a long time, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it squeaked on every rotation. The longer I thought about the door, the less sense it made. Every explanation I tried to build crumbled. Renovation. Impossible. A trick of my memory? Insulting. Hallucination. I wasn't that far gone. I wanted to believe I'd wake up and it would be gone. But just as I started to drift off, I heard it. A sound from the other side of that new door. At first, it was so faint I almost dismissed it. A subtle rasp, like the sigh of the building settling. But it kept repeating. Slow. Deliberate. Scratching. The unmistakable scrape of fingernails dragging across wood. I froze, every muscle tense under the blanket. My breath caught in my throat. I told myself it was a mouse, a pipe, anything else. But the rhythm betrayed it. The scratches weren't random. They moved in short bursts, as though something on the other side was feeling its way across the surface. Closer. Higher. Lower. Searching. I pulled the blanket over my head like a child, as if fabric could protect me. The sound went on for what felt like forever, stopping only when I was sure I couldn't bear it anymore. And then, silence. But silence can be worse than noise, because when you're lying in bed, wide awake, silence gives your mind room to imagine what might be waiting for you in the dark. I don't remember when I finally fell asleep, but I do know one thing. When I closed my eyes that night, I didn't feel like I was alone in my apartment anymore. The next morning, I half expected the door to be gone. I shuffled out of bed groggy, hair sticking in every direction, and opened my bedroom door with a knot in my stomach. For a second, I let myself believe I'd dreamed it all. But there it was. The same plain white door with the brass handle waiting for me at the end of the hall. The morning light leaking through the blinds only made it look sharper, more solid, as though it had always been part of the apartment. I stood there for a long time, staring. My coffee went cold on the counter before I finally worked up the nerve to grab my phone. I thought, if I take a picture, that'll prove it's real. That'll prove I'm not losing my mind. So I did. I raised the phone, lined it up, and snapped a shot. Then I opened the gallery to check. My chest went tight. The picture showed the hallway exactly as it had always been, 2 doors, nothing else. The new door was gone. I took another photo and another. Same result. The wall in the pictures was bare. I turned the phone toward the hall again. To my eyes, the door was right there, bold as day. But to the phone? Nothing. That's when the fear really sank in. I tried calling my landlord, but he didn't answer. Not unusual. He's one of those guys who only calls back when rent is late. I thought about asking my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, but the idea of dragging her into this mess made my skin crawl. How do you even explain something like this without sounding insane? I forced myself to leave for work, though every part of me wanted to stay home and watch that hallway. At least the warehouse gave me something to focus on. By the time I drove back that night, I'd almost convinced myself it wasn't worth worrying about. Almost. When I stepped inside, the air felt heavier. The kind of heavy that presses down on your shoulders, makes your lungs ache a little with every breath. I set my keys down quietly, like noise might wake something up. The door was still there. And that night the scratching came back. At first it was faint like the night before, just enough to set my teeth on edge. But as the hours dragged on, the sound grew louder, sharper. Not frantic, not animalistic, measured. A steady rhythm, like someone deliberately dragging their nails across the wood in patterns. Tap, scratch, pause, tap tap, scratch. It almost sounded like a code. I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and pressed my ear against the door, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. That's when I heard it. Not scratching. Not tapping. Breathing. Shallow, steady, unmistakable. There was someone on the other side. I jerked back so fast the chair nearly toppled. My legs wanted to run, but where could I go? This was my home. My only home. I clenched my fists and told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was pipes again, or a draft, or hell, maybe even my neighbor in the unit next door. But deep down, I knew. No pipe ever whispered. Because that's what came next. A whisper so faint I almost thought it was in my head. The sound of lips brushing the wood, forming words I couldn't make out at first. I leaned in without meaning to, straining to hear. And then, clear as day, I heard it. Michael. My name. I stumbled back, tripping over the chair, crashing hard onto the floor. The sound stopped immediately, like whoever, or whatever, was behind the door knew it had gone too far. I sat there on the cold linoleum, chest heaving, staring at the impossible door and thinking one thing over and over. I never told anyone in this building my name. I barely slept after the whispering. When I finally drifted off, my dreams twisted into something I couldn't untangle. Corridors that bent the wrong way, doors stacked on doors, endless hinges creaking in unison. Each time I reached for a handle in the dream, my hand sank into the wood as though the door had swallowed me whole. I woke drenched in sweat, tangled in the sheets, the taste of metal in my mouth like I'd been biting pennies all night. The first thing I did was check the hallway. The door was still there, but it wasn't the same. The pristine white paint had begun to peel, curling at the edges like old wallpaper. The brass handle had tarnished, a crust of green corrosion creeping across it as if it had been untouched for decades. My heart pounded in my chest, a sick realization forming in my mind. This door isn't just here, it's aging. That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I crouched down, my knees popping against the old floorboards, and ran my hand along the ground. Grit gathered under my fingertips. Thus, more than I'd ever seen in that part of the hall. I rubbed it between my fingers and froze when I saw them. Footprints. Faint, shallow impressions pressed into the layer of dust. bare feet. The shape was human, the toes splayed wide, heel heavy as though the person hadn't worn shoes in years. But the prints didn't go far. They stretched only halfway into the living room before vanishing completely, as though whoever, or whatever, had made them had simply stopped existing mid-step. I jerked back so hard I knocked into the wall. A framed poster tilted and fell, glass shattering across the floor. The sound ripped through the apartment like a gunshot, and for a moment I almost expected someone, or something, to come running out of that new door. Nothing did. I swept the shards into a pile with shaking hands, cutting my palm on a jagged piece. The sting was sharp, grounding, almost welcome. At least blood made sense. I bolted out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me, ignoring the curious look from Mrs. Alvarez as she carried groceries up the stairs. I needed air, noise, people. I walked circles around the block, pretending to scroll on my phone, pretending I wasn't unraveling. For a second I considered calling someone. My friend Nathan would have picked up, even at that hour. But what would I say? Hey man, there's a door in my apartment that wasn't there yesterday, and now it's leaving footprints in the dust. I could already hear the silence on the other end, the soft laugh, the dismissal. I ended up calling no one. When I finally went back, I tried not to look down the hallway. I focused on the kitchen, on reheating leftovers I didn't want, on the TV that flickered with late-night reruns. But the problem with ignoring something is that it waits for you. And I could feel that door waiting. That night the scratching changed. It didn't sound like nails anymore. It sounded heavier, slower. Something dragging across the inside of the wood. A scrape, pause, scrape again. Over and over. I sat in bed, hands gripping the blanket so tight my knuckles ached, counting each drag. The sound seemed to line up with my breathing, as though whatever was behind the door was trying to match me. At 3 a.m. I heard the sound I'd been dreading. The creak. The unmistakable groan of hinges moving. I shot up in bed, sweat dripping down my spine, ears straining for the next sound. My apartment was black, shadows cutting across the ceiling like bars. I told myself I was imagining it, that my brain was still half dreaming. But I knew what I'd heard. When I crept to the hallway, the door was shut tight. But the air around it was different, thicker somehow. Damp, humid, like the air in a basement after a flood. And the smell. God, the smell. Rust and soil. Metallic and earthy, like blood mixed with wet dirt. It oozed from the cracks around the frame, strong enough to make my throat tighten and my stomach churn. I gagged, covering my mouth with my shirt, but my eyes stayed locked on the door. That's when I noticed something new scratched into the surface of the wood. At first I thought it was random marks, another layer of decay. But when I leaned closer, my stomach dropped. It was a drawing. Crude, uneven, gouged deep with something sharp. The drawing was of me, lying in bed, eyes closed, sleeping. The blanket was drawn, pulled up to my chin just like it was right now. I stumbled back until I hit the opposite wall, the thud rattling through my bones. My hands trembled so hard I had to press them flat against the wallpaper to steady myself. My vision blurred as one thought crashed over me, drowning out everything else. Whatever was behind that door wasn't just aware of me. It had been watching, and it wanted me to know. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, staring at the hallway, heart hammering, waiting for something. Anything. By the time I summoned the courage to move, the hallway was just as it had always been. Quiet. So. The door at the end seemed to mock me with its ordinary shape, its clean white paint, and the brass handle that gleamed innocently under the dim ceiling light. I wanted to leave, run out into the streets, anywhere but here. But I couldn't. Not yet. Something kept me rooted to the spot, part fear, part morbid curiosity. I needed to know. I inched closer, every step slow, deliberate, my ears straining for even the faintest hint of movement. My own apartment sounded alien, each creak of the floorboards sharp and accusing. Then I heard it, a whisper. Soft, faint, almost playful. Michael. I froze. My throat went dry. The sound didn't echo from the hallway or the walls. It came from the door itself. From behind it. I swallowed hard. Who's there? I whispered back, though my voice trembled. My knees were weak, my hands shaking as I gripped the edge of the rug. No answer. Just silence. Then another whisper, closer this time. More distinct. Michael, open it. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug, my chest heaving. My rational mind screamed at me to step away, to lock myself in my bedroom and call someone, anyone. But my feet moved of their own accord. The hallway seemed to pull me forward, magnetized. I pressed my hand against the door, half expecting it to burn me, to resist my touch somehow. But it was normal. Cold, smooth, unyielding. Yet I could feel something behind it, something alive. Watching. Waiting. The whispers continued, layered now, like multiple voices speaking at once, overlapping, rising and falling in volume. Some were soft, coaxing. Others sharp, commanding. Michael, come closer. Don't listen to them. Open it. I leaned my forehead to the door, trying to focus, trying to make sense of it. The air around it was heavier, thick with a damp, earthy smell that made my stomach churn, the same metallic, rusty scent from the night before. My skin crawled at the thought of what might be behind the wood. I pressed my ear closer. The tapping started then, slow, deliberate, like fingernails rapping on the wood from the inside. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, over and over. The rhythm set my teeth on edge. I wanted to run, to hide somewhere, anywhere. But my body refused. My eyes stayed locked on that door, my mind buzzing with 1,000 questions I didn't want answered. I could almost hear breathing behind the door now. Not human, not regular. Ragged. Uneven. Shallow, as though whatever was trapped was exerting itself trying to communicate. And then came a faint, wet exhale that made my stomach twist. I backed away slowly, trying not to trip over the rug again. My palms pressed against the walls for balance, and the wallpaper felt sticky under my fingers, damp somehow, like the room had absorbed the humidity from behind that door. The light overhead flickered once and died, leaving the hallway in darkness. My heart slammed in the silence. And then the whisper came again. Michael. Closer. Directly behind me. I spun, but the hallway was empty. The air pressed down, almost solid, and I could feel the temperature drop. Goosebumps rippled over my arms and legs. I realized with a sinking feeling that the hallway had changed. It was narrower. Longer. The shadows seemed to shift when I looked away, moving just outside my vision, creeping closer. I tried to call out to the voices, to demand answers. Who are you? What do you want? My voice came out weak, tremulous. The whispering stopped. The tapping stopped. The silence pressed into me like a physical weight. I sank to the floor, my back pressed against the couch, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced through every logical explanation. Old building settling, pipes, hallucination. But nothing fit. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't imagination. The brass handle. I noticed it glinting faintly in the dying light from the window. I couldn't stop staring at it. Dark smudges had appeared again, long streaks that weren't there before. Like fingers brushing against the metal, reaching for me. And then, as if the silence needed to remind me it existed, the knocking started. Knock. 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 3 sharp raps, vibrating through the floorboards into my chest. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the coffee table. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, each repetition louder than the last. I wanted to cover my ears, to scream, but my body refused to move. It was a rhythm. Deliberate. Mocking. Waiting. Teaching me something. I wanted to open the door. I wanted to step back. My mind fought itself, twisting with fear and irresistible curiosity. And that's when I realized the truth. It wasn't just waiting. It was learning. It knew what frightened me. It knew how to draw me closer without touching me. It knew my name, my habits, my instincts. And it wouldn't stop. Because it couldn't. I sank to the floor, head in my hands as the knocking continued, the whispers layering over each other until I could no longer distinguish words from sound. My apartment had become a trap, a pressure cooker, a living thing. And I was at its center. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, the air thick and suffocating, the smell of rust and soil wrapping around me. All I knew was that the door was alive and it wanted something from me. Something I wasn't ready or brave enough to give. I don't know how long I sat there that night, staring at the door, listening to the tapping and whispers. Time had lost all meaning. My phone lay on the floor beside me, useless. I didn't even think about calling anyone anymore. No one could help me. No one could see what I was seeing. The air around the door had grown heavier still, thick enough that each breath felt like inhaling water. The metallic, earthy smell had deepened, curling in my sinuses, making my stomach twist. It smelled like iron and wet soil, like something freshly unearthed. And then I heard it clearly, a voice, not a whisper this time, but close, raw, demanding. Michael, open me. My hands were shaking, nails digging into the carpet. My heart felt like it had stopped and started again 3 times. Every instinct screamed to run, to lock myself in my bedroom, to throw myself out the window if I had to. But I couldn't move. My body was frozen. And somehow, somewhere deep in my mind, I wanted to do exactly what it said. The handle rattled. The door shivered as though it were trying to move on its own. I could see the edges of the frame bending slightly, light bending unnaturally around it, shadows twisting inside the thin crack beneath the door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I did neither. Instead, I knelt, hands hovering above the brass handle. My fingers were trembling uncontrollably. I whispered almost to myself, "Please, stop." A voice, cold and layered with a dozen tones, answered, "You've already seen too much. You can't stop it now." The handle twisted under my fingers. Not by my hand, but by something else, something on the other side. The door swung inward slowly, creaking on invisible hinges, revealing a darkness so thick it seemed to devour the hallway. I froze. My vision blurred. My chest ached. The blackness stretched past the frame, deeper than the walls of my apartment should allow, endless, oppressive, alive. And then I saw it. Not human. Not any shape I could name. A mass of shadows, twisting and writhing, formed almost like a figure but constantly shifting, impossible to focus on. Eyes blinked into existence, then vanished, countless sets of them, all staring directly at me. And in the center, the faintest outline of a face, my own. It smiled. Wide, cruel, impossibly wrong. I fell backward, hitting the floor, trying to crawl away, but the darkness poured out from the doorway like water, filling the hallway. It moved faster than thought, wrapping around me, pressing, pushing, suffocating. I clawed at the carpet, at the walls, screaming. And then the voices, hundreds of them, started at once. Not whispers this time, but shouting, screaming, begging, laughing. All of them saying my name. All of them saying the same thing. "Come, join us." I closed my eyes, covering my ears, rocking back and forth. Every muscle in my body screamed for release, but there was none. When I opened my eyes, the door had returned to normal. White, pristine, ordinary. Just the brass handle and nothing else. I blinked. Silence. The hallway smelled normal again. The air felt lighter. My apartment was just my apartment. I wanted to believe it was over. But on the wall, scratched deep into the paint, I saw it. One last drawing. Me. Lying in bed. Eyes wide open. Staring. And smiling. And I knew. It wasn't gone. Not really. It was still there. Waiting. Always waiting. I can feel it every day now behind that door. Watching. Learning. Smiling. And sometimes when I lie in bed at night, I swear I hear a faint tap, calling my name. I'll never open it again. But one day, I fear I will. Because whatever is behind that door knows my name. And it's patient.